There's only one side, one party that has an army. Palestinians don't have an army. And there's only one actor, one party, that's the occupying power. We have to remember that the Palestinians are not occupying Tel Aviv. So that in this situation, it's Israel's responsibility to find peace. And the problem is, because of the power differential, because Israel feels so strong, and it's not only strong because of itself, although we have to remember that Israel is not a victim here. It's not a little tiny country. Israel is the fourth largest nuclear power in the world. Israel is the third largest arms exporter. You know, Israel exports more arms than China or Britain. So that it's not this little tiny victim that's only defending itself. It's a powerful occupying power by itself. But Israel's refusal to make a peace with the Palestinians is also based on the idea that we have America behind us. And, you know what? That we have Germany behind us in Europe. And Germany plays a very, very strong role, as you know, in Europe, in pulling Europe back from that engagement that it could have in terms of ending the conflict. Europe is by far, Israel's largest trading partner. In many ways, Europe has more clout, more leverage over Israel than does the United States in certain ways. So that Europe should take its responsibility, and Germany is a problem for us. Now, so, in other words, Israel then feels we can win. We can beat the Arabs. We can beat the Palestinians. In other words, we don't have to compromise even on this 22%. So where Israel is going is towards apartheid. And we use that term in Israel because I think it's very accurate. Israel is going towards this. The slide got kind of cut off a little bit, but and high tech. So, but this is where we're going because, look, Israel says this country belongs to us exclusively, and we want to control it forever. But there's a problem. There are almost 4 million Palestinians living in the occupied territories that we're stuck with. We're stuck with them. In other words, we can't throw them out. We would like to throw them out. And the party of our foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, his party's official position is to throw the Arabs out of the country. And when he talks about throwing the Arabs out, he means first of all the Arab citizens of Israel. And then the Arabs of the occupied territories. So, but it's not practical today. And we also can't, even if we claim this as one country, we can't give the Palestinian citizenship because then it wouldn't be a Jewish state. So we're stuck with them. We can't throw them out, we can't give them citizenship, and we won't give them a state on this 22% because that's too much land to give to Arabs. And so the logic is precisely the logic of apartheid. It's exactly the same problem that South Africa had. What do we do with a black African majority when we want South Africa to be a white democracy? And the answer was you create Bantustans. I'm saying this because a lot of young people don't remember Bantustans. So South Africa set up 10 Bantustans on 11% of South African land. In other words, each little crazy little country for black Africans was on about 1% of South African land, and of course the most marginal land. And the idea was then to shove the black African majority into the Bantustans And they even called them a nice name. They called them homelands. I mean, who could oppose white South Africans helping the black people to take possession of homelands? That's great. So that was the idea. And then the 89% of South Africa that remained could be a white democracy. It's exactly, I would say, the same equation. And that is that in this idea, we close the Palestinians into a state. All right, you want a two-state solution? Fine. We'll give you a two-state solution. There will be a Palestinian state. Israel needs a Palestinian state. But it's a state in which the Palestinians will only get 15% of historic Palestine, of the country. 15%, even though they're the majority population. And then, like Bantustans, that's carved into 4 what we call cantons, or islands. In other words, there'll be a Palestinian canton in the north of the West Bank, in the center of the West Bank, in the south of the West Bank, and Gaza. So that Israel then surrounds the Palestinian Bantustan. We control the Jordan River boundary, and the Palestinians have a state. They're off our hands. We're now free. And we have an Israel that's now 85% of the country, and it's a Jewish democracy. That's what we call it, a Jewish democracy. So that's where we're going. And I'll finish on that, but just to show you just one other map. And this is a map of what I call the matrix of control. Because Israel has created facts on the ground that prejudice negotiations. Israel's idea is, we want to determine the outcome of negotiations before we enter into it. And so, as you can see, the brown areas, all these brown areas, what we call areas A and B, are where the Palestinians live. You know, 95% of the Palestinians or more live in these little islands, these brown islands of areas A and B, that make up about 40% of the occupied territories. In other words, 95% of the Palestinians live on 40% of 22% of a small country. And then, in that 40%, as you can see, it's divided into about 70 islands. And all the little islands are then surrounded by settlements. There are more than 200 Israeli settlements. That's all the blue dots all over the map. Surrounded by Israeli-only highways. So we're developing a whole highway system that's separate for Israelis and Palestinians. These islands are all surrounded by checkpoints. There are 650 obstacles to movement in front of the Palestinians as they try to move from one island to another, which is very dangerous for them. And so you've locked the Palestinians into these islands, and then the pink areas here, you see, are the areas that Israel wants to keep. These are what we call the settlement blocks. Greater Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, the Ariel block, like this. And that creates then the cantons. Then you see the cantons starting to emerge. And this is what leads us to the idea of apartheid. So that I think the apartheid language is an important language because it names the thing. It lets, and apartheid is what we call our policy.